Lee Miller was an utterly extraordinary person. So much of what was happening during World War II was covered up. Lee wanted to communicate what was happening, the truth of the Nazi regime. The red tape she had to get through just to get permission to be able to go was unbelievable.
We don't send women to combat.
Well, that's a problem, because I'm here.
It's really true that the struggles that she had, I also feel like I bumped up against so many of those. It's hard to make a film about a woman, and it's hard to make a film as a woman. I really hope people are inspired by what she did against all odds.
Many years ago, I went with my wife, Roz, to see the Titanic movie. And at the end, I turned to her and I said, if anybody's ever going to play my mum in a movie, I want it to be Kate Winslet. Spool forward like 25 years, and suddenly we find that she's wanting to be Lee Miller. And that, for me, was the best news ever. She started to come here to the archives.
Farleys is very much our family home. I grew up in the house just around the corner from here. It's Granddad and Gran's house. It's now an artist's house and we open it to the public, but we try and keep it just as it was when they were here.
We used to have academic people coming here, museum people and so on, and they have a very linear way of looking at things and very logical. But Kate, she would burrow into something, maybe a pile of letters or some manuscripts or some photographs, and then she'd sit and she'd think, and then she'd say, can you show me a bit more about Lee and her mother? What she was doing was just assembling an impression of Lee's character. So when she got on the screen portraying Lee, it was not as a result of what I had told her or anybody else. It was actually what she had absorbed from the material itself and assembled and recreated this personality, which I felt was incredibly accurate in its portrayal of my mum.
My understanding of Lee had been growing over a prolonged period of time, learning about Lee, who she was, my hands in and on, immersed in the archive and joined at the hip with Antony Penrose for years.
Lost count, actually, how many times she came. The first time it was all very exciting, like, oh, Kate Winslet's coming, but you know, now she's been here so many times, it is just like another member of the family. We scanned in hundreds of photographs that hadn't been scanned before just because the set designers wanted a little bit of extra detail for the street signs in Germany from when they're driving through the road there, like tiny little details. And when there's that much attention to details, it's just such a lovely feeling. You feel like these people really, really care and they really, really want to show it as close as they can.
There was little or no camera footage of Lee and certainly practically none of her talking. And so it was really quite remarkable, the accuracy with which Kate portrayed her. And the first time I saw the movie, we got to this sequence where she's sitting here in this room. And it was this moment of total cognitive dissonance for me, because I was sitting there and I was thinking, that's for real. How the hell did they do that? It was deeply emotional, and I just thought that somehow Lee had come back, because the gestures, the voice tone, the kind of gravelly hit that she puts in that voice, it was just so real.
You think I went to war so people would know my name?
I didn't say that.
I think you did.
So learning to use the Rolleiflex camera was something that I left almost as the kind of final piece to my own personal puzzle. And I spent 2 months with a wonderful camera historian named Claude, who actually built our Rolleiflex, which is an exact replica of Lee's. I spent time with Claude and Tony at Farleys, together with Lee's actual Rolleiflex camera in its case and our built replica. We just made sure that every piece of stitching on the case was identical, and the leather frayed slightly, so she'd even put some gaffer tape on that. So we cut the thing, we put the gaffer tape on. It just couldn't look like a prop.
We were working really with Kate, making this movie for 8 or 9 years. And during that time, with a great care and intimacy, she was very careful about the dialogue. And I remember at one point, I was saying to her, look, I think these lines that the writers have given Sherman don't feel right. And she said, okay, you're Sherman, I'm Lee. How should it be? And we just went backwards and forwards on this. The result is, there's that moment when Sherman says, all those people. And then there's a pause. They were my people.
Cigarette?
Oh, thank you.
Most people call it her most iconic image. Often people have a reaction to it when they don't know the story, and we have to be quite careful with it. She's sitting there as a victor. I mean, a bathroom is such a private place. This is Hitler's intimate space. She's there with Dave, and they're defiling it. And then it's not shown in the movie, but actually after she gets out, David Sherman gets in. He was the one that told us about how it happened, and that was the morning that they'd been at Dachau prison camp. And of course, by then they'd seen the showers and knew that they were actually being used to gas people and kill them. And then she tilts the camera slightly. So you also include the shower head. You've got a Jewish guy in Hitler's bath, and there's the shower just above his head.
Once you've seen it,
No sign of life, sir.
you can never unsee it. There's so much life in a person's eyes. Right up until the moment that there isn't. It was no longer something I'd heard about or imagined. It was real.
During the war, Lee put herself in phenomenally challenging and frightening situations in order to capture what was happening on the front line to the victims, the people left behind, the missing. And she paid an enormous personal price emotionally for the things that she documented because of what she witnessed.
Very soon after Lee died, I was here with my late wife, Susanna, and we were looking for some baby pictures. She said, we'll go and look in the attic. There's some boxes up there.
So she went up, and instead of coming back downstairs again, pick baby pictures of my dad, she came downstairs with contact sheets and Lee's first manuscript for her first combat battle, the Siege of St. Malo, which is what the film opens at.
I started reading in the middle of a page, and it began, machine gun fire belched from the end pillbox. And I thought, who wrote this?
Dad just couldn't believe it. She never spoke to him about the war.
Now, Susanna had known what a deeply conflicted relationship I'd had with my mother. And we'd made peace at the end, the last few years of her life. But we'd wasted many years fighting. I had to understand what it was that I'd missed about this woman who I had held in such low esteem for her whole life. And I was commissioned by Thames and Hudson to write the biography. That's really where the whole picture of Lee Miller emerged, from those boxes in the attic.
Some people just didn't understand why I wanted to do it. Why would I like this woman? People would say to me, because she's flawed, had issues with alcohol, struggled with depression, had PTSD. Does that really make someone dislikable? Doesn't it make them interesting and captivating, and don't you want to know more?
I love that this script is gritty. I love that it's real. I love that it's showing a different sides of a woman. I mean, we know now that you should talk about traumas, but in those days, you were expected to keep it quiet and not talk about it. You were told, the only acceptable way to deal with with it was to drink. If you couldn't deal, have another whiskey.
Lee never ever spoke about her war experiences, so none of us understood what a terrible price that she had paid. Today, we have some understanding of post-traumatic stress disorder. But in those days, the condition really didn't have a name. You cannot unsee the things that she saw. You cannot forget those moments. And it's not only the images, it's the sounds, it's the smells. And I think it was a deadly, corrosive thing that was inside her all of the time that she remained alive.
No one can tell you what it feels like. Shame. There are different kinds of wounds. Not just the ones you can see.
I wish we had known. If only we had known, we could have understood her better and done more for her. I felt that I'd missed so much of her because she had been so deeply secretive. I was at Abbey Road Studios when they were recording, and Dave Arch, the musician, pianist, he played the Lee theme for me. And I found it so moving. And it was just so Lee. It was her. It was a very important moment. I think the most astonishing achievement of her whole career was self-recovery. She did it unaided, but somehow she found the strength to get her drinking under control. And in this process, she reinvented herself as this celebrity chef. Cooking was a kind of displacement activity for the demons that must have been rushing around inside her head all the time.
She was still this incredibly creative, imaginative person, and she needed an outlet for it. She sent herself off to Cordon Bleu cooking school in Paris for 6 months. I love the way that cooking is a lot like photography. In photography, you have to mix your chemicals. You can overcook your print. In cooking, you have to measure up your ingredients. So there's a lot of skill in it, and I think it's quite clever that she went from one to the other.
Move! We have to move, come on!
She was a woman. It was a woman doing this, and not a young newbie, but a well-oiled machine, a woman who was flawed and messy, who rolled up her sleeves and did what she believed in because it was the right thing to do.
I just want to do my part. How hard can it be?
I think we live in a time where femininity is starting to mean something new, but Lee was already redefining femininity as resilience and power and courage and tenacity and lack of vanity. And I think now, since the Me Too movement, we are hearing what women have to say, especially younger women have to say, in a completely different way. And the space has opened up for conversations that we simply couldn't have before. Certainly when I was younger, starting out in this industry, you just had to kind of put up and shut up and be grateful. And it's all changed. The culture is shifting. And so to make this film for me at a time when the culture, I do think, is permanently changing, it feels very resonant to be bringing this film out now.
You must be Lee Miller.
Well, it's a war zone, Colonel. Just Lee is fine.
It's not just a biopic. It's an incredible story, and I think it's quite inspiring in a lot of ways.
It was the poet Santayana who said, "Those who ignore history are condemned to repeat it." And we can see all around us examples of that happening right now. The wars everywhere. They're all as a result of us failing to learn from history. So it's incumbent on those of us who are the guardians of that history to make it known to others in the hope that it will guide them in their decisions for the future.
And really that is her legacy. She was tenacious, she was compassionate, she always looked out for the underdog, and she didn't believe in hiding behind the truth. And she was a phenomenally important woman whose life story really deserves to be celebrated.